Today's gospel reading describes one of the many marvelous actions of Jesus as he's making his way to Jerusalem to suffer and to be put to death. It's a journey on which we are accompanying him during this time of Lent as we prepare ourselves to enter into Jerusalem and to all the events that will take place there. We're on the journey. The event we hear about today is the healing of a young man who seems to be afflicted with something like epilepsy. He's foaming at the mouth. He's grinding his teeth. He's cast into the fire and into the water. And what is particularly emphasized in this story is that the disciples are unable to heal him. Despite having been with Jesus all this time, rendering him not only as a great teacher, but divine. I mean, they get it. And even though they're with Jesus, and they've had faith enough for other things, they don't have faith enough to heal this young man. The father of the young man says to Jesus, if you can do anything, help. And Jesus turns it back around and says, if you have faith. And he says, Lord, I believe. Help my unbelief. It's a really great prayer. I'm always struck by it. I think every year I hear myself saying in a sermon, that is a really great prayer. That is a really great prayer. Lord, I believe. Help my unbelief. Jesus says to that man, all things are possible to him who believes. After the young man is healed, Christ tells the disciples that the healing was only possible through prayer and fasting. In this episode, we have many important things for us, both as general principles of the Christian life, but also like where we are on the stage we are in for this Lenten journey. So not only just kind of Christian principles, how to be a Christian or live or whatever is a Christian, but like where we find ourselves today. It's all too easy for us to hear these words, all things are possible for him who believes, and that such miracles are possible by prayer, and turn them into, take them on our own terms. Turn them just directly selfish. If the Lord's going to grant everything to me that I pray for, what do I really want? We kind of turn it onto ourselves. We start praying only for the avoidance of suffering. We want to wipe out all kinds of suffering. So no illness or anything like that. We might turn it to be just about success. Success in my career, Lord. Financial security. A bigger house and a new car every year. And friends that want a bigger house and a new car every year. That becomes like the thrust of our prayer and almost nothing else. We fill all our time with it so that even we might find ourselves standing in church praying this way. We devote our time to God, and yet these thoughts will plague us. We almost can't shake them. Even to hear them, you're like, well, what else would I pray for? If it's not about a bigger house and a new car, what else is there? And we know that there's something more that's asked of us. So that like the father of the young man, he knew something was asked of him, and he's like, Lord, I believe. Help my unbelief. I know there's some unbelief in there. Help it. And that's the reason we're given the gift of Lent. We've been calling Lent a gift this year. I don't know if you've noticed that. It's a gift. The gift of Lent. It's to purify our minds and to reorient us, to reorder us. The reason why Pascha, the Passion of the Lord, is celebrated with such solemnity and joy and over such a long period. Not just Holy Week to get ready, but 6 weeks that we're in right now. We've just crossed the midpoint. All of this time of preparation, and the Sundays of preparation before that. And when we get to Pascha, don't say to me, now that Easter is over. Do not say that. Because when we get to Pascha, we've got 50 more days going out to Pentecost. It's this expansive time in the church. It makes up just months and months and months so that we don't miss it, so that we don't miss the point. That all things are possible for him who believes. We don't miss the point of what's happened there. This lengthy period following the Passion, the lengthy period leading up to the Passion, is for one thing, and that's so that our hearts will love and that our souls will be sensitive. That's why we're praying and fasting. We're not at war with the body. There's nothing wrong with a hamburger. There's nothing wrong with hamburgers. I miss them. I love them. But we set aside our desires, our will. We push something aside so that we might, through prayer and fasting, be made more sensitive in soul and more soft in heart, so that we might listen to the Lord and follow him. All things certainly are possible for God and for the one who truly believes. And we can't forget that God shows us this power in Lent. It's a gift. Lent is a gift. And when we finish with Lent, it'll lead us right up to the death of Christ. And it's just not what we expect. The miracles of God just are not what we expect. They overturn what we expect. So we may be praying for a bigger house and a new car or whatever, and the Lord turns it upside down. We have to accept what the Lord gives us. We go into Jerusalem, and the expectation was Jesus was going to let everybody have it as the new king and overthrow the Roman government. People had all kinds of expectations. And what he did was a very human thing. He died. But by his death, death was broken. Death was trampled down by his death. Not what we expected. We didn't see it coming. Jesus conquers death and grants us life. And that is the mighty power and wisdom of God. Again, not so we will rightly believe and become like theological technicians, but rather that we might become like poets. St. Porphyrius says this: whoever wants to become a Christian must first become a poet. It's a good line. He says more, St. Porphyrius. For a person to become a Christian, he must have a poetic soul. That's what we're speaking about today. He must become a poet. Christ does not wish insensitive souls in his company. A Christian, albeit only when he loves, is a poet and lives in poetry. Poetic hearts embrace love and sense it deeply. Now, I don't think St. Porphyrius means we all need to start writing verse, although, have at it if you like. But rather, I believe that St. Porphyrius is saying that our hearts must be those that love creation, all of creation. And then even more like that transcend to heaven, to the uncreated. That we need to learn to see like poets and hear like poets and love like poets, to see the meaning in things, the depth of something. To be like poets and musicians and artists and iconographers, and ultimately to be priests, all of us. Not just liturgical priests, that I got that job, but the priesthood of all of us, that we would lift back creation to God and worship him. So we've been on that journey, the gift of Lent, for this purpose. In the first week, we said it was to become icons ourselves. In the second week, with St. Gregory Palamas, we were looking at God's work in the world, and we said that we do that work. It's quite poetic. We do that work. Last week, the cross, which is the center point and the end of our journey. The manifestation of God himself, where we look to see God. And now we have these 2 weeks, St. John Climacus today, St. Mary of Egypt, where we have a male saint and a female saint, those changed by this mystery. St. John Climacus, just very briefly, something about this patron, the patronal feast today of St. John Climacus, who was the abbot of the monastery of St. Catherine's on Sinai. As a young man, he entered the monastery and wrote this book, dying in the 7th century, writing this book in the 6th century at the end of the 500s. He wrote a poetic, ascetic book, The Ladder of Divine Ascent. We've been reading that book. I've been saying something about it in the evening services every night for 3 weeks. We've got just this final week this week. But reading that book, you can't help but look at the cross and consider the cross. And St. Mary of Egypt, whose life we'll look at next week, really just totally changed by the cross. Radically changed by the cross. In the life of these works and the ascetic saints, we see a confirmation of Christ's point in the gospel today that it's only through prayer and fasting. Fasting teaches us not just to live from whatever we get, that we earn or something, but rather from whatever God gives us. And prayer and fasting, that interconnection, is to soften our hearts and make sensitive our souls. That's what we're after. It's not just because some guy 1,200 years or 2,000 years ago in a council wrote down, we're going to fast in Lent, and then we have to figure a way where all the loopholes are. Father, what about this? Because that's not the point. It's about becoming poets, which is a little hard to write back in an email. What about non-dairy creamer? We're supposed to become poets. Sent. Veggie hamburgers. It's not very poetic, although it's on my mind today. Through fasting, we come to learn and we live that we come just based on having to rely on God. It makes us hungry. We're hungry. Then we're hungry for God. And then our souls are sensitive and our hearts are soft, which is really what we want so bad. To pray and fast so that we're more sensitive and that we're softer, rather than what we're fed all week long out in the world of hardness of heart and sensitivity of soul. We want that to be broken from us so that we actually can hear God again and trust God again and follow him again to the cross. And let's pray like this Father. Lord, I believe. Help my unbelief. And then we'll really know what to pray for. And it won't be probably bigger houses and new cars every year. There'll be something of depth there. And the Lord will take care of us. Lord, I believe, help my unbelief. And keeping in mind that this gift of Lent, the prayer and the fasting, it really is about becoming poets. St. Porphyrius is right. And we'll be strengthened. We'll be able to finish the race before us. And we'll come to Pascha with joy, rather than just missed it, kind of. Oh, it was Pascha? Huh. We'll come with this longing for it and joy when we get there. For our salvation is nearer now than when we first believed. And as the first Christians said, Maranatha, our Lord is coming.